As the final word of Eziani's prayer dissolved into the stillness of the sacred grove, the atmosphere over Umudike shifted with a violence that made the ancient trees tremble to their very roots. For months, the village had been trapped in a stagnant, airless heat, but now a sudden cooling wind began to howl from the north. This wind did not carry the dry dust of the desert. It carried the sharp electric scent of a distant mountain storm and the sweet promise of moisture. The oppressive yellow mist that had acted as a shroud over the land began to swirl and thin, pulled away by the invisible fingers of the spirits. Above, the sky, which had been a hard, polished brass for an eternity, began to bruise with deep, heavy purples and charcoal grays. Then came the thunder. It was not a single sharp crack, but a continuous rhythmic roar that sounded like the gods themselves were beating on a giant drum made of the earth's own core. Great jagged streaks of blue-white lightning tore across the horizon, illuminating the skeletal, leafless trees of the village like reaching, desperate fingers. For a heartbeat, the entire world seemed to hold its breath, caught in the tension between the curse and the cure. Then a single fat drop of water splashed into the red dust at the center of the village square. Another followed, and then another, until the sky literally collapsed under its own weight. It was a torrential downpour so thick and powerful that it felt like standing beneath the crashing weight of a waterfall. The villagers did not mourn for the shelter of their huts. They stood in the middle of the deluge, their mouths open to the heavens, letting the life-giving water wash away the layers of dust, grief, and the grey blight that had coated their skin. They danced in the rising mud, crying and laughing in a frenzy of absolute relief. The grey blight was washed away in swirling red rivulets that flowed like blood back into the parched earth, and the foul, rust-colored water in the village stream began to churn and clear, replaced by the rushing transparency of a fresh, healthy current. The land was drinking, and in its drinking it was being reborn. Okeke remained on his knees in the middle of his empty, muddy courtyard, his head bowed against the fury of the storm. The rain lashed his back with a ferocity that felt like 1,000 tiny whips, but the sensation was different for him than it was for his neighbors. To the villagers, the rain was a kiss of divine forgiveness and a promise of a new beginning. To Okeke, it was a cold, relentless reminder of his absolute nakedness. He had nothing left. His barns were now empty shells whistling in the wind, their doors swinging uselessly on their hinges. His prestige, his titles, and his future had all dissolved like salt in the storm. Even the grey blight on his skin began to flick off under the water's touch, but it left behind raw pink flesh that stung and smarted, a physical mark of his shame that would not easily fade. As the downpour continued long into the night, the earth began to heal with a speed that bordered on a miraculous. The parched roots of the trees drank deep, and the dormant seeds in the neighboring farms, those that had not been completely destroyed by the fungus, began to stir beneath the surface. The goddess had accepted the massive restitution. The balance of the world was restored, and the spiritual debt was satisfied. But as the rain drummed against the roofs of Umudike, a different kind of storm was brewing in the hearts of the people. They realized that while the land had been healed, the bond of brotherhood had been severed by a blade of greed that cut too deep for even the heaviest rain to wash away.